Close your eyes once more and let your mind sink deeper into the humid embrace of the ancient forest. We are no longer just looking at the city from the outside. We are becoming part of its very breath. The air in Tikal is a living tapestry of sensations, a heavy blanket of moisture that carries the history of 1,000 years in every atom. As you walk through the residential compounds, notice the texture of the walls, the way the rough-hewn stone feels against your fingertips, cool and slightly damp with the morning dew. There is a profound rhythm to this place, a slow and steady pulse that matches the beating of your own heart. Every footstep on the packed earth sounds like a soft drumbeat, a reminder that under this soil lie the bones of ancestors, their spirits woven into the roots of the trees and the foundations of the temples. Imagine the scent of the evening. As the sun dips below the canopy, the smell of wood smoke begins to drift from the hearths of the common people. It is a dry, acrid smell, mixed with the sweet, heavy aroma of burning copal resin from the high altars. This smoke rises in thin, blue ribbons, curling around the intricately carved lintels of the doorways, where the faces of gods and kings stare out with obsidian eyes. You can almost feel the weight of those gazes. 1,000 years of observation, 1,000 years of silence. The Maya did not see themselves as separate from their environment. They were the jungle, and the jungle was them. Every animal, from the smallest leafcutter ant carrying its green sail across the forest floor to the majestic jaguar prowling the shadows of the Acropolis, was a messenger from another realm. Think about the water. In Tikal, water was more than just a resource. It was the blood of the earth. Imagine the sound of a heavy tropical downpour hitting the limestone plazas. It begins as a low roar in the distance, a wall of sound approaching through the trees. And then, the first heavy drops strike the stone. Thud, thud, thud. Within seconds, the world is transformed into a shimmering silver landscape. The water flows through meticulously designed channels, carved into the stone with a precision that defies the tools of the time. It rushes into the great reservoirs, swirling in deep, dark pools where the reflection of the temples dances on the surface. You can smell the ozone, the freshness of the rain hitting the parched earth, a scent that meant the difference between life and death. For a moment, all the heat and dust of the day are washed away, leaving only the cool, rhythmic sound of the falling water. But even in this moment of plenty, there is a shadow. Look closely at the faces of the people as they gather the rainwater. There is a quiet intensity in their movements, a sense of urgency that was not there in the centuries before. They know that the cycles are changing. They watch the flight of the birds and the blooming of the flowers with an expert eye, looking for signs that the balance has shifted. The priests on the heights of the pyramids are whispering to the stars, asking questions that the stars are no longer answering. The mathematics of the universe, once so clear and predictable, are beginning to feel heavy and strained. The Maya were masters of time, but they were starting to realize that time was a river that could not be dammed. Now, imagine the transition into the deep night. The jungle never truly sleeps, but its voice changes. The bright, sharp cries of the parrots are replaced by the soft, ghostly hoots of the owls and the rustle of nocturnal creatures in the undergrowth. This is the time when the boundaries between the physical world and the spirit world are at their thinnest. You are sitting on a low stone wall, watching the fireflies dance between the pillars of a palace. They look like fallen stars, drifting aimlessly through the heavy air. The darkness is absolute, a thick, ink-black void that makes the flickering torches seem like small, fragile miracles. In this darkness, the grandiosity of the empire feels small. The massive stones of the temples seem to soften, their sharp edges blurring into the shadows until they look like giant, sleeping beasts. Listen to the silence that isn't really silence. It is a hum, a vibration that comes from the very earth itself. It is the sound of growth, the sound of decay, the sound of the jungle slowly reclaiming its own. Every leaf that falls to the ground, every vine that tightens its grip on a stone, is a part of this process. The Maya built their world to last forever, but they were always aware that they were guests in this green cathedral. As you drift closer to sleep, let the image of the white city remain in your mind, but see it not as a monument of power, but as a masterpiece of harmony. See the people, not as figures from a textbook, but as living, breathing souls who felt the same wind on their faces and the same hope in their hearts that you do. They are not gone. They have simply moved into the long green shadows of history, waiting for us to remember their names in the quiet hours of the night. Think of the jade. Imagine a single bead of jade carved into the shape of a flower. It is cold, heavy, and smooth. It represents the breath of life, the moisture of the fields, and the power of the kings. For the Maya, jade was more valuable than gold because it was the color of the living world. Imagine holding that bead in your hand, feeling its weight, its permanence. In a world of shifting seasons and drying rains, the jade remained constant. It was a piece of the eternal, carried in the palm of a hand. Let the coolness of that jade soothe your mind as you descend further into the mist of the past. There is no rush. There is no destination. There is only the journey through the forest of time, where every tree is a memory and every stone is a story. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the scent of the distant sea, hundreds of miles away. It whispers through the openings of the observatory, where the long-dead astronomers once tracked the path of the great star. They knew that the world was round. They knew that the earth moved, and they knew that every end was a beginning. Let that thought wrap around you like a soft shroud. The collapse was not a single moment of terror. It was a long, slow sigh. It was the sound of a tired people laying down their tools and walking back into the trees. It was the sound of the forest saying, "Welcome home." Imagine the shift in the air as we leave the great plaza of Tikal behind and drift southward through the dense, intertwining branches of the mahogany and cedar trees toward the mist-shrouded valley of the Usumacinta River. Here, nestled against the lush green foothills of the Chiapas Mountains, lies Palenque. This city is different from the towering giants of the plains. It is a jewel of elegance and water. As you approach, you can hear the sound of the Otulam River, which the Maya channeled to flow directly beneath the city in stone-lined aqueducts. The sound of rushing water is the constant heartbeat of Palenque. It is a liquid melody that echoes off the limestone walls, a soothing, rhythmic gurgle that never stops, day or night. The air here is even cooler, even more saturated with moisture, as the clouds from the Gulf of Mexico become trapped against the mountainside, draping the temples in a permanent, ethereal fog. You find yourself standing before the Temple of the Inscriptions. It is a masterpiece of grace, rising in tiers that seem to grow naturally out of the hillside. The limestone here has a different quality, a creamy, ivory hue that glows softly in the dim light of the forest. The carvings on the pillars are not just records, they are poetry in stone. You can see the delicate profiles of the lords of Palenque, their hands gesturing with a fluid, lifelike elegance. Imagine the artisan who stood here with a flint chisel, working by the light of a flickering lamp, carefully shaping the curve of a lip or the intricate folds of a headdress. There was no haste in their work. Time was not something to be spent, but something to be honored. Each stroke of the chisel was a prayer, a way to anchor the fleeting beauty of life into the permanence of the rock. Inside the deeper, cool chambers of the Temple of the Inscriptions, a hidden stairway leads down into the very bowels of the earth. Descend these stairs in your mind. They are narrow, steep, and slippery with the humidity of centuries. The air becomes still and heavy, smelling of minerals and the deep, silent earth. At the bottom lies the tomb of the great King Pakal. Imagine the moment his sarcophagus was sealed. He lies beneath a massive stone slab, carved with the image of the world tree rising from his body, symbolizing his journey through the underworld and his rebirth as a god. The room was once filled with offerings of jade, obsidian, and pottery, all designed to accompany him on his long voyage through the night. Feel the profound silence of this chamber. It is a silence that has remained undisturbed for over 1,000 years, a stillness so deep that you can almost hear the slow drip of water from the ceiling, creating tiny stalactites over the span of generations. Moving out of the temple and back into the soft grey light of the misty morning, you wander toward the palace. This is not a fortress, but a labyrinth of courtyards, galleries and towers. The centerpiece is a unique 4-story square tower, rising like a sentinel over the valley. Imagine the priests climbing to the top of this tower during the winter solstice. They would watch as the sun set directly behind the Temple of the Inscriptions, as if the sun itself were entering the tomb of the king. This was the intersection of architecture, astronomy, and faith. For the Maya of Palenque, the city was a map of the cosmos. Everything was aligned to the movements of the stars, the path of the planets, and the flow of the water. They lived in a world where the physical and the spiritual were one and the same, where a king's breath was the wind and his blood was the rain. As you sit in the courtyard of the palace, listen to the jungle reclaiming its territory. The roots of the strangler fig are moving with a terrifying, beautiful slowness, wrapping themselves around the pillars, their grey bark blending with the stone. The jungle does not conquer Palenque with violence. It conquers it with patience. It waits for the plaster to crack, for the roofs to leak, for the people to turn their gaze elsewhere. And then it enters. First come the ferns, their delicate fronds unfurling in the damp corners of the galleries. Then come the vines, reaching out with green tendrils to find purchase in the carvings. Finally, come the great trees, their seeds dropped by birds into the high crevices of the roofs, where they grow into giants that eventually split the stone apart. This is the cycle of life in the Usumacinta. Construction followed by growth, growth followed by decay, and decay providing the soil for new life. Think of the color blue, not the bright, electric blue of the modern world, but Maya blue, a pigment made from indigo and a special clay, a color so durable that it remains vibrant on the walls of Palenque even today. It is a soft, deep, meditative blue, the color of the deep sky and the sacred cenotes. Imagine the walls of the city covered in this color, contrasting with the dark green of the forest. It was a city that looked like it had been carved from the sky and set down among the mountains. But as the centuries wore on, the blue began to fade. The trade routes that brought the indigo from the highlands became dangerous. The artisans who knew the secret of the pigment became fewer. The city that had been a beacon of art and intellect began to pull inward, its songs becoming quieter, its ceremonies more somber. The water, which had always been the city's blessing, began to feel like a burden. The heavy rains that once filled the aqueducts became unpredictable. Sometimes they came with such force that they caused mudslides, burying the lower houses in a tide of earth and debris. Other times, the rains vanished for months, leaving the Ottoman River as nothing more than a muddy trickle. You can feel the anxiety in the later carvings of Palenque, a sense of searching for a balance that had been lost. The rulers began to perform more frequent, more desperate rituals, searching for the favor of the gods in the smoke of the braziers. But the mountains remained silent, shrouded in their veil of mist, and the river continued its indifferent song. Eventually, the people of Palenque began to drift away. They didn't leave in a single mass exodus, but in a slow, steady stream. A family would pack their few belongings, their grinding stones, their ceramic jars, their obsidian knives, and head toward the coast or the fertile valleys to the west. They left the palaces and the temples to the spirits and the shadows. I imagine the last person to walk out of the palace. They might have paused for a moment at the base of the tower, listening to the wind whistling through the galleries one last time. They would have seen the jungle already pressing against the walls, the green leaves fluttering in the windows like ghosts. And then they would have turned and walked into the forest, disappearing into the same green abyss that eventually swallowed the entire city. Now, as you drift further into your own sleep, let the image of Palenque be your sanctuary. Hear the water. Feel the mist on your face. Know that the stone is there, solid and ancient, holding the memories of a people who loved the stars and the rivers. The jungle has guarded these secrets for a millennium, and it will guard them for a millennium more. There is nothing to fear in the silence. It is a fertile silence, a peaceful silence, a silence that invites you to lay down your own burdens and rest. The river flows, the mist rises, and the city sleeps in the heart of the mountains. Think of the jade once more, but this time, imagine it as Pakal's mask. Thousands of tiny pieces of jade, fitted together like a mosaic to create the face of a king. It is a face that does not age, a face that does not worry, a face that stares out into eternity with a calm, unwavering gaze. Let that face be your guide. Let its stillness become your stillness. The world may change, the rains may stop, and the cities may fall, but the jade remains, the spirit remains. You are part of that enduring essence. You are drifting on the Ottoman River, floating past the ivory temples, moving slowly and peacefully into the dark, quiet heart of the night. Leave the mist-heavy mountains of Palenque behind and follow the invisible currents of time further south and east, crossing the rugged highlands until the landscape opens into the lush, fertile valley of the Copán River in what is now Honduras. Here, the air carries a different weight. It is warmer, filled with the scent of sun-baked earth and the dry, sweet aroma of the surrounding pine forests that mix with the tropical greenery of the valley floor. This is Copán, the Athens of the Maya world. a place where the stone itself was made to speak in a language of unparalleled complexity and beauty. As you walk into the Great Plaza, you are not met with the sheer soaring heights of Tikal, but with a forest of stone stelae. Tall, four-sided pillars, carved in such high relief that the figures of kings seem to be stepping out of the rock to meet you. Run your fingers over the surface of one of these monuments. The stone is a greenish volcanic tuff, softer and more workable than the limestone of the north, which allowed the artists of Copán to achieve a level of detail that is almost hypnotic. You can feel the texture of the king's elaborate headdress, the individual feathers of the macaw, the scales of the celestial serpent, and the intricate jade jewelry that adorns his wrists and ankles. Every square inch of the stone is filled with information, a dense thicket of hieroglyphs that record the dates of accessions, the performance of rituals, and the alignment of the planets. There is no empty space. To the people of Copán, silence in the stone was a missed opportunity to speak to eternity. Imagine the sculptor sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree, his eyes squinted against the dust, his hammer and chisel creating a steady, metallic rhythm, tap, 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 that echoed through the valley for centuries. Move now toward the hieroglyphic stairway, perhaps the most ambitious project ever attempted in the Maya world. Imagine a massive flight of 63 stone steps leading up the side of a great pyramid. But these are not ordinary steps. Every single one of the 2,000 blocks that make up this stairway is carved with a glyph. It is the longest stone inscription in the Americas, a vertical history book that tells the story of the Copán dynasty from its very beginning. As you stand at the base and look up, the sheer density of the information is overwhelming. It is as if the city were trying to shout its importance to the gods. But as your eyes reach the higher steps, you notice something subtle. The carvings become slightly less precise, firm, the glyphs a bit more hurried. History was catching up with Copán. The weight of its own past was becoming too heavy to carry. Behind the grand monuments and the intellectual achievements of the elite, the valley was reaching its breaking point. Copán was a victim of its own fertility. For centuries, the rich soil of the river valley had provided more than enough maize and beans for everyone. But as the population grew, the people began to move up the hillsides, clearing the forests to plant more crops. Imagine the sound of the axes echoing through the hills, the crash of the great pines falling to the earth. Without the trees to hold the soil, the summer rains began to wash the mountainside into the valley. The river, once a clear and steady source of life, became choked with silt and mud. You can feel the shift in the environment, the way the sun feels hotter on the unprotected slopes, the way the air feels dustier and thinner. The harmony between the city and the land was fracturing, and no amount of stone poetry could mend it. The end of Copán was not a sudden disappearance, but a slow, agonizing decline. Malnutrition began to show in the bones of the people. Archaeologists find the evidence today: stunted growth, signs of anemia, the marks of infection. The kings continued to build, perhaps more desperately than ever, but their projects remained unfinished. Walk through the East Court, where the statues of the howler monkey gods sit with their hands on their knees, staring out with eternal, vacant grins. Look at the altar queue, which depicts the 16 kings of the Copán line sitting in a circle, passing the torch of power from one to the next. It is a monument to continuity, created at a time when continuity was the one thing they lacked. The last king began a temple, but the carvings were never completed. The chisels were laid down, the stone left half smoothed, as the social fabric of the valley finally unraveled. There was a finality to the silence at Copán that feels different from the other cities. In the 9th century, the royal palace was set on fire. It wasn't an invading army that did it, but likely the people themselves. A final act of rejection against a system that could no longer protect them from hunger and disease. Imagine the smoke rising over the valley, the red glow of the embers reflecting in the muddy waters of the river. The elite fled, and the city of scholars became a city of ghosts. For a while, a few farmers remained, planting their corn in the shadows of the crumbling monuments. But eventually, they too moved on. The valley returned to the animals. The macaws, which the Maya had worshipped as symbols of the sun, now flew over empty plazas. Their raucous cries, the only sound in a world that had once been filled with the chanting of priests. As you drift deeper into sleep, let the image of the green stone of Copán be your anchor. Feel the coolness of the valley at night, after the sun has gone down and the dust has settled. The river still flows, though its path has changed many times over the centuries. The stelae still stand, their stone faces weathered by the rain, their glyphs holding on to secrets that we are only beginning to decode. There is a profound peace in this place now, a peace that comes from the end of struggle. The trees have returned to the hillsides. The birds have reclaimed the sky. The city has become a part of the earth again, a quiet layer in the long history of the world. Think of the obsidian, the black, volcanic glass that the people of Copán used for their most delicate tools. Imagine a flake of obsidian, thinner than a human hair, sharper than any metal blade. It is dark, reflective, and cold. In the moonlight, it shines like a piece of the night sky held in your hand. Let the darkness of that obsidian surround you. It is a protective darkness, a space where your mind can rest and recharge. You are moving away from the crowded plazas and the heavy stones, floating like a feather on the warm breeze that blows through the valley. You are moving toward the deep, unbroken sleep of the jungle. The great hieroglyphic stairway is still there, but in your mind, the glyphs are no longer words. They are just patterns, like the ripples on a pond or the veins in a leaf. You don't need to read them. You don't need to understand the dates or the names of the kings. All you need to do is feel the rhythm of the stone. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, ascending into the clouds, into the starlight, into the silence. The valley of Copán is below you now, a sea of dark green shadows, breathing in and out with the slow, steady rhythm of the earth. Everything is as it should be. The cycle has closed, and a new one is beginning in the quiet of your dreams. Think of the macaw, the red, blue, and yellow feathers that once adorned the headdresses of the lords. Imagine a single feather drifting down from the sky, spiraling slowly, catching the last light of the moon. It is light, weightless, and soft. As it touches the ground, you feel yourself touching the edge of sleep. The colors fade into a gentle gray, then into black. The sounds of the jungle become a distant hum, a lullaby that has been playing for 1,000 years. You are safe. You are at rest. The city of the scholars is watching over you, its stone eyes closed. Its long story is finally at its end. Now, turn your gaze toward the north, away from the river valleys and the mountain mists, and follow the cooling winds as they sweep across the flat, limestone shelf of the Yucatan Peninsula. The air here changes once again. It loses the heavy, damp perfume of the rainforest and becomes thinner, drier, scented with the aroma of scrub brush, wild sage, and sun-bleached rock. We are entering the Pulk Hills, a land where the earth hides its water deep in its belly. Here, the Maya could not rely on rivers or lakes, for there are none. They lived at the mercy of the clouds, and their architecture reflects this desperate, beautiful devotion to the rain. You are standing in Uxmal, the city of the magician. Before you rises the Pyramid of the Magician, a structure unlike any other in the Maya world. Its base is not square, but oval, its smooth, rounded sides rising like a polished pebble from the floor of the forest. The limestone here is a warm, honey-colored hue, glowing with a soft radiance as the sun begins to set. Imagine the architects of Uxmal, who abandoned the jagged, towering forms of the south for these graceful, feminine curves. Run your hands along the lower walls of the nunnery quadrangle. The stone is carved with a precision that mimics the intricate patterns of woven lace, or the feathers of a serpent. Thousands of individual stone pieces were fitted together like a giant, three-dimensional puzzle to create the masks of the rain god, Chak. Look at the faces of Chak that cover every corner and every frieze of this city. He has a long, curling, elephant-like snout and deep, hollow eyes that seem to be searching the horizon for a storm. In Uxmal, Chak was the only god who truly mattered. Every building was a prayer for water. Imagine the people of the city during the long dry season, when the chultuns, the underground cisterns carved into the rock, began to echo with emptiness. They would look up at the sky, where the heat shimmers in waves over the parched earth, and they would see the dragonflies darting through the air, a sign that the rains were near. The sound of the city was the sound of waiting, a quiet, patient expectation that lived in every courtyard and every shadowed doorway. As the sun sets, the honey-colored stone turns to a deep, burnt orange, then to a ghostly violet. The heat of the day radiates from the walls, warming the evening air. Walk toward the governor's palace, a long, low building that sits upon a massive terrace, overlooking the entire Poot landscape. From here, the world looks like a rolling sea of dark green scrub, punctuated only by the distant, silent shapes of other ruins. The Maya of Uxmal were masters of the horizon. They aligned this palace so that every 8 years, the planet Venus would rise in direct alignment with the central doorway. Imagine the priest astronomer standing here in the cooling breeze, his eyes fixed on that single, brilliant point of light, knowing that his city was perfectly synchronized with the heartbeat of the cosmos. But even here, in the land of the rain god, the silence eventually arrived. Or the Puke style, with its decadent carvings and its complex water-saving systems, could only sustain itself as long as the rains were consistent. When the great droughts of the 9th and 10th centuries finally reached the north, the chultuns ran dry. The prayers to Chek, carved so beautifully into the stone, went unanswered. The people did not fight a war. They simply understood that the land could no longer hold them. They gathered their belongings and began a new migration, moving further north and east toward the coast and the great cenotes of Chichen Itza. Leave Uxmal to its long, sun-drenched slumber and follow that northern path. The landscape becomes flatter, the trees shorter and more gnarled, and then the forest opens to reveal a sight of terrifying symmetry, the Castillo of Chichen Itza. This is a city of a different soul. It is a place of iron-hard geometry and the shadow of the feathered serpent, Kukulkan. The air here feels electric, charged with the energy of a people who merged the old Maya ways with the fierce traditions of the Toltec warriors from the west. The sound of Chichen Itza is the sound of the wind whistling through the columns of the Temple of 1,000 Warriors. A low, haunting moan that sounds like the breath of a giant. Walk toward the sacred cenote, the great natural well that drops 60 feet down into the dark, still water of the earth. The air around the rim is cooler, smelling of moss and ancient stone. This was the mouth of the underworld. For the people of Chichen Itza, the water in this well was sacred, a direct link to the gods. They would cast offerings into its depths: gold, jade, incense, and fine pottery, hoping to ensure the survival of their world. Imagine the splash of a jade bead hitting the dark green water, the ripples spreading out until they touch the limestone walls, then slowly fading into nothingness. The water is deep, silent, and cold, holding the secrets of 1,000 years in its murky embrace. But time, even in this fortress of stone, was running out. Chichen Itza rose as the southern cities fell, a final, brilliant flare of Maya civilization. It was a city of trade, of war, and of profound science. But the same environmental shadows that haunted Tikal and Copán eventually reached the north. The soil, never deep in the Yucatan, became exhausted. The trade routes shifted. The internal tensions between the warrior classes and the priests began to fray the social fabric. One day, the great ceremonies atop the Castillo simply stopped. The feathered serpent, which had crawled down the pyramid stairs every equinox for centuries, now crawled down toward an empty plaza. Now, let your mind drift toward the final shore, toward the jagged cliffs of Tulum, where the Maya built their last great outpost, overlooking the turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea. The air here is salty and fresh, filled with the roar of the surf and the cries of the gulls. Tulum was a city of the dawn, the first place to see the sun rise over the ocean. Its walls were thick, its temples small and sturdy, designed to withstand the hurricanes that swept in from the sea. This was the twilight of the Maya. As you stand on the cliffside, feel the spray of the ocean on your face. The water here is not a hidden well or a muddy river. It is a vast, infinite horizon. The collapse was complete. The grand kings were gone. The hieroglyphs were becoming a lost language, and the great cities were being swallowed by the green. But as you look at the small, resilient temples of Tulum, you realize that the Maya had not disappeared. They had simply adapted. They became a people of the sea, trading obsidian and honey along the coast in great dugout canoes. They traded the burden of empire for the freedom of the salt air. The silence that fell over Tikal was not an end. It was a transformation. As you drift now into the deepest part of your sleep, imagine all these cities: Tikal, Palenque, Copán, Uxmal, Chichen Itza, and Tulum, all sleeping together under the same moon. The jungle is a warm, green blanket. The ocean is a rhythmic, soothing lullaby. The stone is a memory, and the stars are a guide. You are floating above the peninsula, seeing the dark shapes of the pyramids as islands in a sea of leaves. The wind is soft. The night is kind. The jade is back in the earth. The obsidian is cold. The maize is sleeping in the soil, waiting for the next rain. You are part of this long, slow breath of history. There is no more to do. There is no more to see. The story has been told, and the book is gently closing. You are sinking into the white limestone, into the cool water of the cenote, into the soft moss of the temple stairs, down, down, into the peaceful dark where the Maya and the stars are one. Sleep. The feathered serpent has returned to the sky. Sleep. The rain god has finally closed his eyes. Sleep. The jungle has you now, safe, still, eternal. Sleep. Leave the salt-sprayed cliffs of Tulum and the turquoise horizons of the Caribbean, and let your consciousness drift back inland toward the silent, sun-scorched heart of the northern plains. We are moving into the final, deepest layers of this story, where the lines between history and myth begin to blur into one continuous, golden haze. The air here is still, as if the atmosphere itself is holding its breath, waiting for the world to turn. You are entering the realm of the deep memory, the time after the cities, the time when the forest began to speak with a louder voice than the kings. Imagine the sound of the wind as it passes through the empty, hollowed-out chambers of a nameless ruin in the deep bush. It is not a whistle, but a low, resonant hum, like the vibration of a giant bell that was struck 1,000 years ago and is still ringing, ever so softly. This is the sound of the Great Dissolution. It is the sound of the plaster turning back into dust, and the dust turning back into soil. Feel that dust between your fingers. It is fine, white, and ancient. It is the physical remains of an empire, now nothing more than a soft powder that coats the leaves of the shrubs and the wings of the butterflies. In this stage of the story, the buildings are no longer monuments of power. They are skeletons of stone. Think of the limestone as if it were bone, porous, light, and enduring. The rain has washed away the bright reds and the deep blues of the frescoes, leaving behind a monochromatic world of ivory and shadow. But in this lack of colour, there is a new kind of beauty. It is the beauty of essential things. You are seeing the world as the Maya did in their final days, not through the eyes of a builder, but through the eyes of a wanderer. Every stone has a weight, every shadow has a depth, and every silence has a meaning. Now, imagine the sound of the rain returning after a century of drought. It doesn't come as a storm, but as a soft, persistent mist that clings to the trees for months on end. This is the rain that healed the earth, but it was too late for the cities. The water that would have filled the reservoirs now only feeds the moss and the ferns. Watch as the moss begins to carpet the Great Plaza. It is a vibrant, neon green, so soft that it swallows the sound of your footsteps completely. You are walking on a cloud made of vegetation. The world is becoming muffled, padded, protected. The sharp edges of the pyramids are being rounded off by the relentless growth of the green. Listen to the trees as they talk to each other in the dark. The Maya believed that trees were living beings with their own souls and their own languages. The mahogany trees whisper of the ancient kings they once saw. The cedar trees sing of the birds that have long since flown south. The ceiba trees, the most ancient of all, hold the memory of the stars. They have seen the sky change. They have seen the constellations shift their positions over the long count of centuries. In the presence of these trees, your own life feels like a single heartbeat, quick, bright, and precious. There is a profound comfort in being small in such a vast and ancient forest. Think of the pottery. Imagine a single ceramic jar, left behind in a darkened room of a palace. It is painted with the image of a dancing monkey, its tail curled into a spiral. For hundreds of years, this jar has sat in the darkness, untouched by light or hand. It holds nothing but the air of the 9th century. It is a time capsule of stillness. As the roof above it slowly gives way to the roots of a tree, a single beam of sunlight hits the jar for the first time in a millennium. The colors are as bright as the day they were painted. The monkey is still dancing. The spirit of the Maya is still there, captured in a piece of fired clay. It didn't break. It simply waited. Feel the cooling of the earth as night falls over the entire peninsula. This is a different kind of night than the ones we visited before. This is the night of the long peace. There are no torches now. There are no chants from the temple tops. There is only the moon, a great silver shield that turns the jungle into a sea of liquid mercury. The ruins look like white islands in this silver sea. They are beautiful in their abandonment. They are finally at rest. They no longer have to represent the gods or the glory of men. They can just be stones, sitting under the stars, growing old with the grace of the mountains. Imagine yourself lying down in the center of the Great Plaza at Tikal, but in this time of total silence. The stones beneath you are cool and solid. Above you, the Milky Way is so bright it casts a shadow. You are looking at the same stars the Maya looked at, but you are seeing them without the weight of their calendars or their prophecies. You are just a soul, drifting in the vastness of the universe. The temples of the jaguar and the masks rise up on either side of you like the walls of a canyon, protecting you from the wind. You are safe in the cradle of history. Think of the word collapse. In the silence of the night, that word loses its power. It doesn't feel like a disaster. It feels like a long, slow exhale. It feels like the earth taking a deep breath after a long day of work. The Maya didn't disappear. They just stopped trying to be an empire and started being a part of the forest again. They returned to the small things. The corn, the family, the rhythm of the seasons. They traded the stone for the leaf. And in doing so, they became immortal. As long as the forest remains, they remain. As you drift now into the final, darkest part of your sleep, let the rhythm of the jungle be your guide. The cicadas have reached a steady, hypnotic pulse. It is the sound of the earth's clock. It is a clock that doesn't count hours or minutes, but breaths and heartbeats. Your breathing is now perfectly in sync with the forest. Every inhale is the rising of the mist. Every exhale is the falling of the dew. You are no longer a traveler. You are the forest itself. The jade mask is now just a collection of green stones, returning to the soil. The obsidian blade is back in the shadow of the mountain. The feathered serpent has folded its wings and is sleeping in the clouds. There is nothing left to hold on to. There is nothing left to wonder about. The story has dissolved into the air. The silence is your blanket. The darkness is your friend. You are sinking down, past the roots of the ceiba tree, past the limestone bedrock, into the cool, dark waters of the eternal synod. The water is still. The water is clear. The water is peace. You are floating in the center of the world, where the time of the Maya and your own time are one and the same. There is only this moment. There is only this rest. Beyond the silent plazas and the moss-covered stones, let your mind drift even deeper, moving past the physical ruins and into the very essence of the earth that sustains them. We are moving into the final, most quiet layer of the Yucatan, the world beneath the world. The Maya called this place Xibalba, but for you, it is not a place of fear, but a place of ultimate, cool tranquility. The air here is no longer moved by the wind. It is a still, crystalline atmosphere, smelling of fresh water, ancient minerals, and the deep, damp limestone that has been filtered by the earth for millions of years. Imagine yourself floating down into one of the great hidden cenotes of the north. You are descending slowly, as if gravity has forgotten you. The vertical walls of the well are draped in long, emerald green vines that reach down like thirsty fingers toward the water below. The light from the surface is a brilliant circular beam, cutting through the shadows like a pillar of solid sapphire. As you move through this beam, you see the tiny motes of dust dancing in the light, each one a microscopic piece of history, a fragment of a temple or a grain of ancient maize, suspended in the silent air. Now, your feet touch the surface of the water. It is not cold, but a perfect, refreshing temperature that makes the boundary between your skin and the world disappear. You sink slowly into the blue. Here, beneath the surface, the sounds of the jungle vanish. The chatter of the birds, the rustle of the leaves, and the hum of the insects are replaced by a profound, liquid silence. It is the sound of the world's beginning. You are floating in a cathedral of water. Above you, the roots of the great saber trees pierce through the limestone ceiling, hanging into the water like white, ghostly pillars. They are drinking from the same source that gave life to the kings and the commoners alike. As you drift in this subterranean sanctuary, think of the endurance of the water. The rains that failed the cities in the 9th century eventually returned, trickling through the rock, drop by drop, century by century, to fill these deep basins. The water doesn't care about the rise and fall of empires. It doesn't care about the names of the gods or the dates carved in stone. It only cares about the cycle. The evaporation, the clouds, the rain, and the return to the earth. You are part of that cycle now. You are as fluid and as timeless as the water itself. Look at the floor of the cenote, far below. In the dim blue light, you can see the shapes of the offerings left behind. A jade bead, a ceramic bowl, a polished piece of shell. They are not lost. They are exactly where they were meant to be. They have found their final rest in the heart of the earth. They are safe from the wind, the sun, and the hands of man. They are becoming part of the stone again. Everything that was once taken from the earth is slowly, peacefully being returned. Now, let your mind rise back up through the water, through the limestone, and back into the forest, but see it now as a place of total, perfected balance. The collapse is no longer a mystery to be solved. It is a masterpiece of nature's resilience. The trees have grown over the palaces, not to hide them, but to hold them together. The jaguars sleep in the throne rooms, not because the kings are gone, but because the rooms were always meant to be part of the wild. The silence is not a lack of life, but a fullness of peace. Imagine the night air once more. But this time, it is the air of a world that has forgotten the need for time. The great calendars of the Maya are still there, buried under the roots, but they no longer need to be turned. The long count has reached a place where every day is the same day. A day of sunlight, a day of rain, a day of growth. There is no more past, and there is no more future. There is only the long green present. You are lying in a hammock made of moonlight, stretched between two ancient pyramids. The world is rocking you gently, a slow, rhythmic motion that mirrors the swaying of the trees. Think of the fireflies one last time. They are emerging from the shadows of the nunnery in Uxmal, thousands of them, blinking in a slow, synchronized rhythm. Light, darkness, light, darkness. They are the heartbeats of the forest. With every pulse of light, your mind becomes clearer. With every pulse of darkness, your body becomes heavier. You are fading into the landscape. You are becoming the grey lichen on the stone. You are becoming the scent of the evening orchid. You are becoming the silver reflection of the moon on a damp leaf. The great kings, Pakal, Jasor Chan Kawil, 18 Rabbit, they are all resting now. Their wars are over. Their monuments are finished. Their names are written in the stars, where the wind cannot reach them. They are no longer rulers of men. They are rulers of the silence, and you are their guest. You are invited to share in their stillness. You are invited to lay down your own history, your own names, and your own worries. Here, in the heart of the Maya world, there is enough room for everyone to be forgotten. And in being forgotten, you are finally free. The jungle is a mother. She has wrapped her arms around the cities and pulled them close to her chest. She is singing a song that has no words, only the sound of the wind and the rain. It is a song that has been playing since the first stone was laid, and it will play long after the last stone has turned to dust. You can hear it in the back of your mind, a low, steady vibration that pulls you down toward the earth. You are sinking now through the leisures of the night, past the abandoned temples, past the sleeping birds, past the growing vines, down into the deep, warm soil, down into the cool, silent rock. You are the stone. You are the water. You are the night.